Time in a story does not move forward equally. I find it helpful to think of a necklace with various size beads on it. Donald M. Murray.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I'm Lee Hull.
And I'm Lee Esses. Today we are continuing our conversation on rhythm and how you manipulate rhythm as far as the words that you put in place. In today's particular instance, we're talking about sentence length and punctuation. These types of things will affect how your readers imagine and interpret the words that you have and make it really come to life.
So this is going to work in conjunction with your dialogue tags and the rhythm and pacing that you use there. We did mention punctuation alone with those dialogue tags, but it's not just with dialogue that punctuation and sentence length matters.
The same way you can manipulate your reader into pausing at certain moments because you're inserting a dialogue tag or rushing through a line because there's no dialogue tag in the middle, you can manipulate your reader into ingesting information even if it's outside of dialogue. And that's what today is really about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is that punctuation. When I'm editing the podcast, I pay a fair amount of attention to how much time is placed between each thought, each interruption, each change in pace. All of those have different amounts of time in between in order to clearly convey the information that we're trying to get across.
You can do this too with your writing because your reader will interpret those pauses, those breaks subconsciously, and it influences how they feel about the story. Let's take this for example. You'll read the sentence, "In that moment, he needed cookies, but they were out of butter," with a different urgency than he, in that moment, needed cookies, but they were out of butter. Which is also different than he needed cookies. Each of these gives a different level of urgency for the amount of how much he needed the cookies. The first one, he's like, in that moment, he needed cookies. It would have been nice, but maybe he can just divert and pick some up from the store.
And that one, the punctuation is just commas. It's all said more or less in one breath. It's all said as one stream of thought. There's nothing breaking it up besides the commas to make it easy to understand. So those couple of commas in the middle didn't do much to slow the reader down.
But the second example, you have M dashes. He, M dash, in that moment, M dash, needed cookies. And then but they were out of butter is a completely different sentence. And so you get a sense of he really needs cookies, and then it's this big disappointment that they're out of butter. And it sounds like he really needs those homemade ones, just by the different change.
And then the last one is periods between every single word. This puts equal and large amounts of weight on every single word. He needed cookies.
These differences, these changes in the flow, in the punctuation, how and where you place things can change the tone. You can use them for comedic effect, or you can use it to convey a sense of very serious, direct urgency.
If you're trying to add urgency without making it comedic, this is like cinnamon. It's that spice that you can only use a couple of times before it feels very overused. If you're trying to make it comedic, that happens more often when you're over-punctuating, when you're shooting too high on that. The long, smooth sentences are great for long, smooth moments, but when you are inserting energy into the scene, periods, commas, M dashes, even quotation marks like we talked about last episode, can be a huge help in breaking up the momentum and adding energy to that scene.
I'd really encourage you to look at the standard practice use for all of the different punctuations, especially when it comes to your ellipses, your M dashes. Each of those will convey a different meaning and a different weight to how the rhythm of the story goes. Ellipses will slow it down. M dashes can convey an urgency if they're used as like an interruption. So know what you're trying to convey and find the right punctuation to fit the style.
And your sentence length goes hand in hand with how you're punctuating things. Not only do shorter sentences make things feel like they're moving faster, like we talked about in the white space episode, but they add a weight to whatever the last thing that was said is.
So you can look at the last example that we had. He needed cookies. Because each sentence is technically a single word, there is a lot of urgency. It has a lot of quick pace to it. Even though I slow down to read it, and that's kind of how you play the emphasis, it still has this urgent feeling to it because the sentences are shorter.
In a lot of the editing that I do, I am breaking up sentences. I am making something feel and move faster by putting one thought in one sentence and making it streamlined because of the punctuation you are inserting in. So, approaching how you break up the sentences also conveys information to your readers.
One of the biggest culprits in this are the conjoining words. Your ands, your buts, anything that puts basically two sentences into one. Those can be used very well if you have that chaos character in their mind that is just one long run-on rambling sentence that conveys a feeling to us of who this person is. But if you want to convey and have a faster pace, a faster rhythm to your story, you need to split those sentences up, make them shorter, and give them their own place in the paragraph instead of joining them together with conjunctions.
I've found that when I start to notice the sentences are really long, that means that there's more than one long sentence too close to each other. So pick one of them, break them up. You can have long sentences. We're not saying don't ever have a long sentence. We're saying strategically choose which sentences are long, which ones are short. Another way you can take out words or take out parts of a long sentence, and this is one that I wish I could tell my younger self, is all of those interjections and em dashes that I am so very fond of. Take it out, make it into a separate sentence. Then we can read it in one linear flow instead of having to interrupt ourselves and go back and forth. Another way to break up sentences is to put a period after every word. That's the he, period, needed, period, cookies.
This style forces the reader to slow down, but still puts an equal amount of weight that is a very heavy weight on every single word. While the concept may seem a little bit contradictory, it creates urgency because of the emphasis to it, not because of the rhythm.
I find I'm doing this mostly in dialogue when a character is like clutching another character by the ears on either side of the skull going, get this in there. Word, period, word, period, word, period. That makes it very clear how that character is delivering the line without me having to add a dialogue tag to go, he was emphatic about this particular thought.
Very similarly to having a period after every single word, you can also have just verbs in your sentence. You indicate something very primal, very basic is happening. This was done very well in one of the early seasons of Buffy with Faith when she does want, take, have. It's this very basic thing of she sees something she wants, so she's going to take it, and then she has it. But it's all conveyed by her just saying want, take, have.
I found you can make this even more powerful by making that single word sentence its own paragraph. So you will build up to this single word sentence with the paragraph prior. And then when it lands, it feels like you've got this wave cresting as far as momentum and energy in the story with that single verb paragraph.
So something similar to this. Hunger gnawed at the back of his mind. It started as a scratch, then a claw, then a gouge. The smell of the cookies was too tempting. Something in him begged to act, to devour the whole plate. Need. And you place that need on a separate paragraph. You combine the white space that we talked about with this sentence length, and it creates a visual focus on this very short sentence. and a lot of weight placed on that need.
And generally, if you're asking yourself, should I use this technique? That verb is almost an answer to a question. So in this particular example, something in him begged him to act. What was that thing? Need. Even though the question was only implied with the word something, it was still almost a call and response. It was an echo of the momentum that you are building prior to that moment.
When it comes to punctuating for effect, for determining rhythm, the rules really do fly out the window. Obviously, you still have structure and rules to place around, but school never taught you can punctuate after every single word. That's technically breaking the rules because need is not technically a full sentence. That's where fiction and stylistic writing really becomes fun, is because you do get to play with it. You do get to bend the rules. You still need to end sentences with punctuation, but it can be an em dash if somebody gets cut off in what they're saying, or if their thought gets cut off. For the most part, you can just kind of follow your heart with the punctuation. Your editor may tell you to take it out later, and that's okay. They should provide a reason for it. And if you can counter it with a reason why you had it there in the first place, maybe you can come to a compromise. But follow your heart with your punctuation, and of course,
Write selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.